Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full and complete review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2. So this season had many ups and downs, many episodes that we thought were going to be filler, but come to see at the very end of the show, that all comes together. And actually, before we go on to talking about each individual episode, I do want to address that concept of filler. So often, fans will be watching a show, any franchise, any fandom, doesn't really matter, but they will be watching a show, an episode, and claim it filler because it seems disconnected. We really need to know better as a whole, because just because something may feel like a filler episode right now doesn't mean it will be filler. You often don't know what's going to be filler until you fully watch the show. But man, I have to say, I don't think people who like to claim filler for every episode that doesn't quite fit with what they're expecting for the episode to go, the season as a whole, any kind of that where they don't like it, so they claim it's filler, so they can have a constructive criticism of it. I don't know if they could watch the old shows from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, even 80s, 90s, and early 2020s, not 2010s, 2010s. Like, could they go watch Hogan's Heroes? Well, when are they going to, stop the Germans? Or F-Troop? Like, MASH even. Has some episodes, like, not everything's always connected. Like, I think the need for us to have always interconnected stories is destroying many of our abilities to just watch a show. Let's just take a more recent show, DuckTales, the reboot in 2017. There are episodes that felt totally disconnected from the ongoing plot in the background. That was not a big focus, that ongoing plot, except for an episode here and there. It was just something that comes going along in the background. Every now and then it'll play into an episode, but it wasn't the main focus. So there was no filler episode in there because, nobody thought about an overarching plot. But here in Star Wars, Star Trek, so many other franchises, it's like, okay, this episode doesn't feel connected to the plot. Even if it's not connected, can we just have a opportunity to just let the characters have an adventure? Let's take the episode where Tech does some riot racing. Okay, obviously we know why the episode was done, is to give us character development for Tech and to foreshadow Sid potentially betraying the Bad Batch. And we know how both of those things ended up going on. I'm not going to spoil it yet. But the thing is that was all set up. But the thing is, that could have just been a fun adventure as well. Just give the characters a chance to relax and do something not as stressful. Well, that still was pretty stressful, but not as stressful as being hunted by the Empire. So that I'm just taking as an example of characters should be allowed to have stories. Well, they don't do anything major, nothing major about the plot. I'm just saying. But really, overall, Season 2 was great, so we might as well just begin looking at each episode. So timestamps will be down below for each episode, so you can skip ahead. This will be a compilation with all my spoiler-free and full reviews for each episode, so I do hope you enjoy it. So let us begin with Episode 1. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and I just finished watching the first episode of Season 2 of The Bad Batch, Spoils the War. My full review will be later today for the 2 episodes I dropped, but in this little short review, I thought I'd just give you some of my quick initial thoughts. I thought it was a good start. It does end with a cliffhanger, which makes sense when you have 2 episodes dropping at once. Kind of makes sense. It's also a more common storytelling technique. We also see how that Hunter wants to keep Omega safe, and that's leading him to avoid doing jobs that are potentially more worth more, but going with safer jobs. We also see that they're basically educating Omega on different types of ships. We also see that Omega is capable. So we're going to see a little more later on, but this is just my initial thoughts. I just finished watching the second episode of the second season of The Bad Batch, that being Ruins of War. This continues the story from where episode 1 leaves off, and just my initial thoughts for a quick short review is, it concludes the story, obviously, but it also has a lesson for Omega to learn, and that's really the heart of the episode, really, the lesson that Omega is learning. The other members of the Bad Batch don't have a lesson to learn, but Omega does, and I mean, she's a kid, she's still growing up, so of course she has the lessons to learn. We also get some insight into how the Empire is actively different from the Republic, Because, yeah, sure, the Republic was always an empire in all but name, but there are some key differences, and this episode shows one of them. But I'm going to be touching on that in my full review. And I just finished watching the 2-episode premiere for Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2, the episodes being Spoils of War and Ruins of War. Episode 1 of the second season of The Bad Batch is Spoils of War. It opens up with the Bad Batch, though some mission on some kind of tropical planet. So basically, this episode opens with the exact same shot that the last teaser trailer, not teaser, trailer, which I did do a reaction, link in somewhere on my channel. Anyhow, it opens up exactly the same way, which I saw was a neat creative choice. So yeah, I just thought it was a neat creative choice. That's really all I can say about that. But right off the bat, shows us two things going on, especially with Omega. One, that the Bad Batch is having her study ships, especially Imperial ships. And two, that she is quite capable, but they are still looking after her, looking out for her. And actually later in the episode, that does create a little bit of conflict, because Omega does overhear it, but we don't know actually that she does overhear it until episode 2. But anyhow, basically, Hunter and Echo are talking, and essentially what Hunter wants to do is get a big skull so that way they can hide away, keep Omega safe and all that. Meanwhile, Echo is like, what we did was right with rescuing Omega, but we have to continue to fight the Empire. This does come back in later in episode 2, so we'll talk about that later on. But that's setting up a little bit of a conflict there, but not too much of a conflict. Because the main conflict in this episode is really, of course, with the oncoming threat of the Empire. That's really the main thing. But anyhow, they're going to go to Serena, so that's Count Dooku's homeworld, to steal a part of his war chest, which is huge. We actually get a shot of the Empire taking it away in 3 gigantic cargo ships. In fact, one of them, the Rebels in Star Wars Rebels, stole. Not one of those specific models, but you never know. But anyhow, that same type of ship there. That's also where they meet that one droid whose name I just totally blanked on. But you know what? We're talking about the Bad Batch, not Star Wars Rebels. Which, by the way, check out my reviews of Rebels if you haven't done so already. There's somewhere on my channel. But anyhow, so and the Tiki troopers haven't been shown yet. These are still clone troopers. But you can definitely tell that these clones know what they're doing because they're clones. When they realize something is up, they act on it, and they aren't incompetent. Sure, they may look incompetent, but the Bad Batch are special forces. In real life, I have a feeling you put a U.S. Army unit against a U.S. Army Special Forces unit, like Delta Force or something like that. The regular unit probably doesn't stand that good of a chance, because the Special Forces do subtle tricks and all that in order to accomplish their goals. Just so I address that there. But going back to what's going on in the episode, so Omega, Tech, and Echo get trapped in one of the container ships when it launches, because the clone commander, I forget his name, they said it a couple of times, but he orders the ship to launch immediately because he knows he recognizes what's going on. Someone's trying to steal his war chest. And he also orders the ship to jettison escape pods as well. He does that later because he knows what's going on there, which shows he is intelligent. He's approaching the situation intelligently. In the meantime, Hunter and Wrecker are trying to escape the clones, and they're doing that by going through Count Dooku's palace, and they end up in Count Dooku's office, I guess, and they use Count Dooku's escape turbolift to escape, which I really like that callback, because I remember seeing that a couple of times in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, so that's a nice little callback there. But they have to escape by going through the ruined city there, and they come away. That's what they do, but they don't do that in this episode. That's next episode. I was getting the episodes mixed up. But this episode does leave on a cliffhanger, because Omega, Hunter, and Omega, Echo, and Tech decide, because of the loss of the escape pods, they're going to go back to the planet in one of the cargo containers, because they have some ascent boosters and all that. Sci-fi mumbo jumbo. So they do that. So that's the cliffhanger. I hope I got the right cliffhanger. I really should record these two sections in 2 different orders. Oh well. But anyhow, that's kind of my general thoughts and recap of episode 1, I have more to say about episode 2, so let's just jump right down to episode 2. So episode 2, Ruins of War, is really where the two-part premiere comes all together, brings the story elements that are introduced in the first episode together. One is the lesson that Omega learns. Basically, she learns that the Bad Batch, that yes, she's not a burden on them. She was confident of that because of her, they can't have a normal life. And Echo is the one who addresses this, which is good because we needed more character development for Echo, which we didn't really get in season 1. And basically, he says that if they had to do it all over again, they would rescue her. And said that by doing that, their lives are better because they would be, if not, they would be fighting for the Empire or worse. The worst being implied death. But I think that is actually that's important. And let's be real, no matter what, they were not going to have a normal life. They're clones. And even regular citizens of the galaxy are not having a normal life. They encounter a local resident, Sereno, in this episode, who is, he's normally on their side. There's a little bit of distrust there, which does make sense. They don't know if they can trust each other. And I say nominally because I don't know for sure, is he going to be on the side or not? He's definitely not pro-Empire, but is he more like, essentially, as we see with the Rebel Alliance they're all separatists who are rebels, and you have basically pro people who want to restore the Republic who are also rebels. And they get along for fighting the Empire, but they get along for everything else. Now, he does clearly identify that he identifies with Sereno rather than the Separatists, so that is kind of interesting. But that's actually good for Tech, because essentially he had the blind spot that he wasn't aware of. A blind spot because he kind of lumped, probably because of the pro-Republic propaganda, lumped all Separatists together. And he admits that he hadn't considered that people who supported the Separatists or were from Separatist plans, that there were cultures that existed before the Separatists, before the war, which is something to take note of. But that does kind of show how propaganda can dehumanize people. Now, and while sure, it's not really addressed in that way, but it's like, he hadn't really thought about before the war. Which just makes sense for clones because they were all before the war. But everything does work out in the end. They part ways successfully with the local resident, and they escape the Empire. But that's not where the episode ends. No, there's some other stuff is what's going on there. But I'll address how Omega learns the lesson about the treasure is not important, but the Bad Batch are. That's essentially what she actually learns this. But this I think is the most interesting part. So after the Bad Batch escape, the Admiral who was there and gave the order to destroy Camino, he's under the assumption the Bad Batch were killed during that, were eliminated. So, when he was as a clone commander there on Sereno, in his report said that the Bad Batch, he cited a Clone Force 99, he's like, I'm going to go there and say, that must be wrong. I saw that. And then he says this, Governor Tarkin cannot know of my mistake. And he asks the clone to basically falsify records to say the Bad Batch, Clone Force 99, weren't there acting rogue and all that. And the clone's like, he's like, no, I can't do that. I cannot falsify a official report. And what does the Admiral do? He pulls out his pistol, which is not a clone pistol. It's the same pistol that we saw Imperial officers use in Star Wars Rebels. He points it at the clone and says, no, you won't. I will. And shoots the clone dead. And the clone falls off the balcony and all that. Like, I thought he was going to push, but yeah, using the blaster is more Imperial style. But that's showing the corruption of the Empire in one way. The Republic, even in its final days when it was in the Empire in all but name, was still different from the Empire. The clones, sure, they did some, even with chips, they executed the Jedi and all that. But they weren't going to falsify records. They were just told that Jedi were traitors. And probably if there was a Jedi who turned on the Jedi, to be like, okay, he's trustworthy. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case from what we're seeing. Like, if they saw a Jedi attack another Jedi, they would assume that Jedi is on their side, on the side of the Chancellor, or the Emperor, or whatever they were calling him at that point. You get different names for him, like, we even have one in the Clone Wars, Rex says Sidious under the influence of the chip. Meanwhile, Cody just says, "My lord." Like, it just varies. But that does actually probably explain why Anakin survived, because they saw him supporting them, and not the Jedi. So the clones are clearly not going to falsify the records. Like, they're loyal, good soldiers. Like, they're not going to rely on official records. But the humans who are supporting the Empire, where it's about power for them, they don't care. They will falsify records for their own means. And that's what we're seeing. This really shows one of the last differences that remain between the Republic and the Empire besides the name. The clones were not going to falsify records. Sure, they may become a little meaner, push people around a bit more, but they're not going to falsify records just to appease somebody who wants to advance up the power ladder. No, they're not going to do that. That is one of the differences, and probably another reason why Palpatine wanted to get rid of the clones, because they would have been probably too honest. So some food for thought there. So that's where I'm going to end my review for Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2, Episodes 1 and 2, Spoils the War and Ruins the War, respectively. So I would love to hear from you. Feel free to let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of these two episodes? Let's get the discussion going. So I thought I would give my spoiler-free thoughts on The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 3, The Solitary Clone. Like I expected, this is a Crosshair episode. This episode really, this is a little bit spoilers, but it's the Art of Clone Wars callbacks, but it really does focus on how Crosshair is alone in the Empire. How his choices are isolating him, not just from the Bad Batch, but also from what connections he does have in the Empire. This episode also, it's kind of obvious from the trailers, and I'm going to just say it, does see the return of Commander Cody, one of Crosshair's few, like a better term, friends in the Empire still. But his actions in the episode kind of destroy that for him. And you can see, Crosshair is alone. He is the solitary clone. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my review of The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 3, The Solitary Clone. Also, if you haven't done so already, watch the episode. I mean, I will be spoiling it, so if you don't want spoilers, go watch it on Disney+, then come back here. Anyhow, let's get into my full review. So like I expected in my predictions, this is a Crosshair episode. In fact, the rest of the Bad Batch do not appear at all. And I gotta say, that's actually pretty impressive. But yeah, so let's really address how Crosshair is the solitary clone. He has been isolated from his brothers, specifically the Bad Batch. He's also isolated among the clones. Because we saw this in Season 1, and the Bad Batch talked about it a little bit too. The other members, how they are different from the rest of the clones, therefore they don't have the same closeness to the other clones as the other clones do among each other. They are more isolated, or more solitude, if you will, from the rest of the clones. And Crosshair particularly feels this. Even watching Season 1, The Bad Batch, and the Bad Batch arc in the Clone Wars, Crosshair was kind of the odd one out from the group. He was a bit more isolated one, a bit more closed off, and we're really seeing how he is a solitary clone here. But going back to the episode plotline itself, not just the semantics, because we gotta get back to understand the plot to talk about the semantics. Crosshair is cleared for medically cleared to go back to duty after being on that platform on Kamino for over a month apparently. And this Kamino rotations are short, but man, that's pretty impressive that he stayed loyal to the Empire through all of this. But he's assigned to go on a mission under the command of Commander Cody. And this kind of brings up, Cody's like one of the few people in the Empire that Crosshair has any sort of relationship with, a friendship even. Again, I don't know quite if Crosshair even had friends, even among his brothers in the Bad Batch, but he's definitely, Cody's probably his closest friendship he has left within the Empire. But by the end of the Empire, Crosshair's own choices help destroy that. Which very much fits nicely into Commander Cody's arc as well. So it's when they first meet up in the episode, Cody talks about how other clones are been questioning Order 66 and all that, but he repeats the idea that good soldiers follow orders, essentially trying to convince himself he did the right thing. So by the end of the episode, he's definitely made a decision on what he's going to do. That is Cody. But Crosshair has also cemented the decision that he made back in season 1 to stay loyal to the Empire, to be a fascist goon, in other words. But they'll send you a formal separatist plan to take it out, or not take it out, but to basically eliminate the opposition and to rescue the Imperial governor who was taken captive by the original and legitimate governor of the planet, who's using an army of reactivated battle droids. And so notice when, and this is something very interesting to notice, when the Imperial governor first goes on the plane, that he brings TK troopers with him. But when they're captured, the Empire sends the clones in. And not all the clones make it out. The Separatist remnant puts up a fierce fight. They want to be independent from the Empire. But in the end, Cody and Crosshair make it up to, well, I don't know. I don't want the governor's balcony, I guess. I'm not quite sure exactly what that is. But you know what? Cody diffuses the situation. He basically gets the governor to surrender, and she does. But the Imperial governor is like, no, kill her. Cody's like, what? No, I negotiated. But Crosshair takes the shot. And then we get this silent sequence. Right, first the Imperial governor orders the former governor to be put on display as a warning to the citizens, residents of the planet. But this entire sequence of them leaving the planet, quiet, just the skull. And Cody's the only trooper not wearing his helmet. Crosshair has his helmet on. All the surviving clones have their helmets on. And all the TK troopers the Empire has sent in for occupation have their helmets on. Cody is the only one with no helmet on. Which is quite telling. You saw this in also other episodes of the Bad Batch. And also the Clone Wars, when Rex gets older 66, his helmet is off and he's shaking. But when he puts the helmet on, he's basically fully under control of the chip then. He was fighting it. Then in the Bad Batch, the good guys, the Bad Batch, except for Crosshair, even Crosshair has his helmet on certain times, but they have their helmets off during key moments where the other clones are basically fist pumping the Empire, more or less. And then in Star Wars Battlefront 2's campaign, when Inferno Squad lands on not Paleo, on Aiden's homeworld, I forget the name of it, which is a lower Imperial planet then. But Aiden and Del have their helmets on, but Hask has his helmets on. And guess which two betrays the Empire? The ones with their helmets off. Cody, at the end of this episode, off screen, but he has one last conversation with Crosshair on Coruscant. They talk a little bit more about having to live with their choices. And then we find out through Admiral Rampart that Cody has gone AWOL. He's gone AWOL. Likely deserting the Empire. He decided he can't continue fighting for the Empire. He has to leave the system. And he does. But that's not Crosshair. Crosshair is in the system. He's made his choices. Very likely because he has no other place to go and feels like, as a soldier, the Empire is the only place for him. That's probably why it's partially keeping him loyal. But it does seem like he likes the ideas of order in that. So in some ways the Empire makes sense for him. It fits him. So two clones who are probably both feeling solitary, but one makes the choice to stay in the system and the other makes the choice to leave the system. And going back to another thing, the Empire, you can tell, is not using clones for the oppression. They're using them to send in for when there's actual fighting going on. But when they need to occupy the planet, they're not using the clones. They sent the clones off the planet. They just brought in the TK troopers for their occupation. Which I think, and the TK troopers eventually become the Stormtroopers. Which I think can explain why Stormtroopers at many times are so ineffective. Because they're not an army. They're not like the clone troopers designed to go fight enemies. Granted, we do see them be very effective in Star Wars Andor, Stormtroopers, but the thing is, they're not a military force. They're a militarized police force. That's what they are. That doesn't mean they can't be cracked shots in that, but what their purpose is not to fight an army, but to fight mobs, to fight civilian uprisings. But facing an organized force like the Rebel Alliance is something the Stormtroopers, the TK Troopers, are not playing for. So the Empire, once they get their control, it seems like they're going to discard the clones because they just need a police force. They don't need an army anymore, a proper military. They just need to kill. They don't need to actually fight. But they do end up. But I think that's showing a lot that the clones are not being used for occupation more and more by the Empire because probably because, like Cody said, clones are questioning the order. And I have a feeling it's not just Order 66, but the entire new order of the Empire. They're questioning it, like, is this what we fought the war for? And more and more clones are going missing, deserting, going AWOL. Going rogue even, like the Bad Batch. I have a feeling we are building to a clone rebellion. And this episode, while being about Crosshair, is showing how he's isolated from all the other clones. And he is isolated in Empire, but he's really isolated from the people who've gone through similar experiences as him. And those are the ones who are questioning the orders, who are thinking, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this. Some, like Crosshair, will make a choice to stay loyal to the Empire, but others, like Commander Cody, will make the choice to desert the Empire. But I think that is where I'm going to end this review. The rest of the Bad Batch did make an appearance, but we did get a very important Crosshair episode. Shows us what's going on in the Empire, but also shows us what's going on with the clones and with Crosshair in particular. Shows how he is isolated, which does maybe make some hope that there is a chance for him to be redeemed. I don't think he's going to get a redemption, at least not a redemption like that other clones probably will get, or like even some other characters like Iden have gotten in Star Wars. I have a feeling he's going to get a redemption more like Darth Vader or Kylo Ren, if it even occurs. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 4, Faster. So one label that might be able to be applied to this episode is filler. But just because something seems like a filler when you first watch it doesn't necessarily mean it will be filler. Sure, this episode does not cover, what's happening to the clones after Order 66. It does not cover Crosshair and his story. It doesn't even cover the Bad Batch, coming up in conflict against the Empire. But just because it doesn't do that doesn't make it filler. Now, if the plot threads they put in here, especially regarding Sid, come to fruition, then it won't be filler. But that remains to be seen. So this episode definitely is one where we can't make our final judgment on it because we haven't seen the rest of the season yet. So we just got to wait and see. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 4, Faster. So if you haven't seen my spoiler-free review yet, it'll be linked in the cards above and also in the description as well. But let us get into spoilers. The premise of this episode is that Hunter and Fives, they're off doing another mission for Sid. So Tech, Wrecker, and Omega are sent with Sid to do another mission. Basically to be Sid's bodyguards during a race where she's sponsoring a droid racer. And eventually a bet is made and all that. And the droid gets damaged beyond repair. So it ends up being Tech has to be the one to do the race. And he does win because unlike the other races who are sinking aggressively, because this is a race where pretty much anything goes. Similar to pod racing in that regards, but also not because it's more based off of speeder chassis rather than whatever the pod racing is doing. And it has some inspiration with a lot of kart-style racing games, video games, with obstacles and all that and dangerous shortcuts. But with Tech wins because he's thinking defensively, He drops the weapons because he realizes that they're not only sucking up power that he can use for shields and speed, but also extra weight that is impacting him. And because he does that, because he's thinking, defensively, he's able to have enough, essentially, speed that he can take that dangerous shortcut and survive. And also in order to win, and that also free Sid from the person she made the bet with that went sour for her. And so by taking that shortcut, he's puts himself pretty much almost in the lead, and he's able to, because he knows how the other two racers are thinking, i.e. aggressively, he's able to get them to hurt each other, even though they're actually working together. and that allows Tech to take the win. So that's actually also vague. That's all good in that, but what does this say about our characters? That's a question, because some people may apply the label of filler to this episode, but not necessarily. There's some threads. One, we learned that we already knew that Tech was, analytical and all that, but we also see how he thinks. He doesn't think strictly in the terms of combat. Sure, as we saw in 2 episodes ago, he can hold his own in combat very well, but his mindset is not necessarily, guns blaze, but more of how can we achieve this goal most efficiently, and that doesn't necessarily. And if combat aggressiveness makes that harder, he doesn't do it. This is actually probably very key in all of this, because this really, we do learn about Tech a lot, but we also learn about Sid. We get the implication because of basically the gangster that she made the bet with, that she has a much darker past than she's let on to the Bad Batch. So that does lead up. Is that going to come to fruition? Is that going to come to head? Well, the Bad Batch learn about Sid's past, and will that create some distrust between them? That's some good question. That's really, I think, where this episode really wanted to tell us, that Sid has a darker past than she's let on. The Bad Batch already knew that she's made some questionable choices in the past, but there's a difference between questionable choices and having some really bad decisions, maybe some potentially nefarious decisions in the past under her belt. That's the thing, and the gangster actually tells the Bad Batch, specifically Tech, Omega, and Rekko, that basically that there's more to Sid than she lets on, that she has a darker past, and their loyalty won't necessarily be returned. Now, I kind of wish they skated through in a line where like one of them question, is he saying that to create distrust, or is he actually warning us? But that's what I was thinking, like, okay, I think it's clear to say that definitely Sid has a much darker past than she's let on, but we don't know how dark, and we don't know what she's actually told the Bad Batch and how they will react. But I think it's safe to say that Sid, the way she was way back when the Batch first met her in season 1, is different than how she feels about the Bad Batch now. I think there is definitely a change, because she is surprised when Omega steps up and basically agrees to a second race, after though Tech and Rekko do come in and talk with Omega before they make the final agreement, but agree to a second race for what was supposed to be the droid pilot racing, but Tech ended up racing in order basically to get Sid's death wiped out and her released from the gangster. And that all seemed to have surprised Sid. So that's definitely shown that maybe now that she's maybe learning some stuff she hadn't really considered, some character development for her. I think we need to see some more development in that, but I think there's some interesting stuff going on there. I also really did just want to point this out and like the scene where Tech basically states that sure, we could go in guns blazing, but the gangsters are dangerous. We don't know how they will react. And that also goes back to what characterization we do learn of Tech, that he is not an aggressive thinker. If aggressiveness and fighting is the only way to do it, he's not going to outrule it, but everything we see in this episode tells us that is not his first course of action. But I think I'm going to leave you there with those two thoughts, that this more Sid's past to be revealed that could create conflict, and the characterization of Tech, which we really did sorely needed. So I think those two things alone prove that this episode is not a filler, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think different than me? Let me know in the comment section down below. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 5, Entombed. So to begin with, this is a fun adventure. And that's really the strength of it. It's just a good, fun adventure going through a system of, caverns. I'm trying to keep it spoiler-free, but needed to tell you that much. And we also get to learn more about the character of Fee. So she's that pirate treasure hunter lady. So we get to learn more about her. But other than that, this episode seems to be pretty light on plot and connecting to the greater series. But you never know, because we don't really learn anything new about our main Bad Batch characters, but we do learn some more about Fee, and who knows how her role will be later in the episode. But let's remember, Star Wars Rebels, the Space Wars, the Pearl Girl, ended up being very important in the season finale, so You never know what may come back that you dismissed out of hand originally. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my full spoiler review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 5, Entombed. But let us begin right in. So, the premise of this episode is the Bad Batch and then that pirate lady who's also a treasure hunter, Fee. They go basically in search of a treasure that they find a compass for among some debris that they are actually more in a junkyard when Omega and Rex were sent to go get a new compressor. They also found this. Tech dismissed it as all the other stuff they grabbed as junk. But Fee saw this one piece that ended up being a compass. So they go to a barren planet that's not on any known charts, and they have to go through and basically find the treasure. And eventually they do find what might be the treasure. Basically, it is some kind of crystal thing, but it activates a mech, for lack of a better term. When it's taken out, that's kind of weird, but probably just how it operates, ancient. There's some reference to wherever the site is being over 1,000 years old, predating the Jedi and all that. And the design of the mech we already saw in the trailers. And it does make me think, could the Zephyr be somehow involved? Because its main weapon reminds me so much of one of the attacks that the Tomb Guardians in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order have. So I'm thinking this could be connected with the Zephyr. Of course, obviously we don't know for sure, but we do know that the Zephyr did have an interplanetary civilization that eventually fell to the dark side. So having a big mech that basically just destroys a planet as it walks along, it's not that unrealistic, especially in the later times. And especially because of with some of the stuff going on inside of it, which we originally think is just a mountain, does make me think there's some kind of, having access to the Force could be very beneficial in operating it. And the reason why the Bad Batch and Fee are unable to operate it, stop it, by technical means is because they don't have access to the Force like the Jedi do. And also the Zephyr. I think there is some referencing going on. There's some connections there. But that's maybe just good for greater Star Wars. But I'm not sure how this will come back into play in the Bad Batch. Could it be filler? I don't think so. But this definitely feels more like filler than last week's episode, which was a tech-focused episode where we get to learn about tech. But in this episode, we get to learn about Fee. And I have a feeling she's going to play more of a role. So this episode was about establishing who she is. And I think that's the important thing. With whatever stories are developing, we need to know who Fee is in order to understand the story when it plays. And that's what this episode is for. And for the context of the episode, they just created something that connects nicely with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Oh, somewhat nicely, because it's all kind of speculative at this point still. But I do appreciate that we can draw those connections, that we can form the bigger Star Wars universe, the lore of it all. But of course, there's also a little bit of parallel to what's going on with the clones and how they did tell the story. Especially with the compass that was just a tool in order for the devastating weapon, while the clones were just a tool for Palpatine, the creation of the Empire, destruction of the Jedi, end of democracy in the galaxy. So there's some nice parallels there. But I do think the heart of this episode is showing some fun references that might be for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I hope, and getting us to know who Fee is, so that way when she plays a role later on in the story, we know who she is. Give a good baseline for her characterization. That she searches for treasure, the hunter and the rest of the batch sees her as a pirate, minus Omega, but also that she's not above doing. While she may put herself in danger, she's willing to let treasure go in order to, survive, for lack of a better term. And there's a couple other things going there that she exaggerates and does tall tales. So that's like the baseline of her character, and that's what we need to know for whatever they're planning in the future. But that's why I'm going to end this review. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of this episode? I would love to get a discussion going. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 6, Tribe. So to begin, I did thoroughly enjoy this episode, but it's going to be hard to talk about this episode spoiler-free, but I'll give you kind of the highlights of what's the best I can, I guess I can say. One, this episode brings in some concepts from an unfinished episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Two, it also continues the idea that's been brought up multiple times that Hunter wants Omega to just be a kid, and how the current state of the galaxy is preventing that. What else? Oh, we get to see a certain character that we got to see in the trailers, so that's not too much of a spoiler warning. But just listening to those stuff is not really a good review. So this is what I'm going to tell you. Go watch the episode, and then my full review is coming out, so stay tuned for that. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 6, Tribe. So there will be spoilers in this episode, or this review I should say. You have been warned. I did make a spoiler-free review, but just to recap, watch the episode, then come back and watch this review, because, like I said in there, this episodes are hard to do a spoiler-free review because of how much that goes on and how much of what occurred is intricately connected with the spoilers, and I found it very hard to formulate a way to express all my thoughts besides it's good and fantastic without spoiling the episode. So, what's actually going on in the episode? So the episode begins with Bad Batch going, basically it's a smuggling ring run by droids. I was going to say droid smuggling ring, but the droids are not being smuggled. But they are smuggling a Wookiee. And Omega does find the Wookiee and rescues the Wookiee, and who we learn is a Jedi. It's Grungy. He's one of the younglings from the Younglings arc of the Clone Wars, so a nice little connection there. So that's what the episode is really about. The beginning of the episode is, for that better term, a MacGuffin, to get them to that station to rescue Grungy, which they were not intending to do, but they just happened to do it, and they all rolled with it. They were giving some Imperial chain codes to the smuggling ring run by the droids. I forget their exact name, but they're not that important to the episode, because this episode really is about Grungy, about Omega. That's really, and a little bit about Hunter as well, but only in so much that it reinforces that he thinks that it's unfortunate that Omega, and then in this episode also Grungy, can't just be kids. They are living in a world that, in reality, that doesn't allow them just to be young kids, to have fun and all that. And that's a very common thing we've seen in Hunter's character throughout both Season 1 and Season 2 of The Bad Batch. Because in this episode, it's also a Wookiee episode, so we get to see Kashyyyk while the Empire is just starting to take over, and they're using the Trandoshans to do it. Imperial troops have not really come to occupy the planet yet. Sure, we did see a few clone troopers helping the Trandoshans, but there was only like maybe 2 to 4 of them. Not a huge number. Probably just these clone troopers are more liaisons from the Empire. And the Trandoshans are using old separatist tech that's now been commandeered by them in the Empire. And it's all to strip mine, not yet strip mine, but strip Kashyyyk of all its resources and of course the Trandoshans just want to hunt Wookiee pelts as well. We actually see them attempt to destroy a sacred Wookiee site. The Bad Batch stops them, and also works to put out the fire that they started. And this is on a small scale, but then at the later episode, after Grungy fights the Trandoshan commander, there's a bigger fire, and so the Bad Batch and all the Wookiees work to put out the fire. So they're not just fighting the Empire, the Empire's allies, the Trandoshans, stopping them from doing the harm, but they're also actively working now to stop the harm itself, stop it from spreading. So hopefully we'll see in the later episodes the Bad Batch taking this beyond just this episode. This is really the first episode that we got to see that in. But that is something that Echo has been wanting the Bad Batch to do more, to take more of the fight to the Empire, to help basically the galaxy from the cruelty of the Empire. Echo, and that's good that we're seeing. Echo, really even back in Season 1, he's always been the one who's been a lot more willing to go and fight the Empire. But at the same time, he hasn't had that much character development. And I have a feeling we're seeing the setup for his own character story. Whether it's going to be developed or not, we still need to be seen. But it's definitely his character arc is being set up in these past episodes. And also, of course, because we have a Jedi, there's the Force involved and all that. And actually, what's really interesting is The clone troopers wanted to tell Imperial Command right away when they saw the lightsaber marks, but the Trandoshan commander was like, "No, they didn't need to know if we can get the Jedi first." And so the Empire probably has no idea that Grungy is on Kashyyyk because the Trandoshan commander was looking more for glory for himself rather than actually serving the goals of the Empire, which does connect nicely to the trend that we've seen over and over again with the Empire. It's so much there's so much basically jockeying for position, your own glory and power, that the actual goals of the Empire may not get accomplished because your personal goals you place above higher. You want to climb the ranks, you want to get more power and authority within the Empire, or just even personal glory. It has basically caused the Empire to fail before. Literally in I believe, yes, in Star Wars Rebels, I believe it was episode 0 Hour, Admiral Constantine, looking for glory, breaks formation, and that gives the rebels an opportunity to get reinforcements. Like, basically, seeking your own glory hurts the Empire. But it's also the word I'm looking for is also a key feature of the Empire, without which it wouldn't really be the Empire. So it's a double-edged sword, if you will. But they do stop the Trandoshan in this instance, though we do know from Fallen Order and then also Aftermath Life Death that the Empire does eventually occupy all of Kashyyyk and save the Wookiees. So it's kind of a bittersweet ending. It's good. They stopped the Empire, but we as the audience knows it's not permanent, so it's bittersweet. But at the same time, it's also good because the ending, sure, they stopped the Empire, but it was more about getting Grungy back to his home that he never actually knew because he grew up in the Jedi Temple. But it also gives us insight into Wookiee culture, even though he doesn't know which village, which tribe, if you will, he came from. The village that they do find do take him in, and we can also see the parallels between the Wookiee spirituality and the Force. The Wookiees in Star Wars have basically their spirituality is deeply connected with the planet of Kashyyyk and the trees, and basically it's how the living force and how things are interconnected to it. And so Grungy, you can easily tell he picks up on that and sees the connection between the Wookiee spirituality and the Force. Probably recognized it as one and the same. It's just the different terminologies that are different. And you see this often in Star Wars, where a local planet's religion or spirituality is another aspect of the Force, which is a nice through line for all Star Wars. Shows how everything in Star Wars, even if you don't always have the same characters popping up, it's still a connected world because of that through line of the Force. So that's probably where I'm going to end this review. There's probably more I can say, but I said what I wanted to say, and we can continue the discussion in the comment section down below. So share your thoughts in the comment section. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy, and Episode 8, Truth and Consequences. Timestamps will be down below for each individual episode, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoy my review, so let's begin with Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy. So this was a thrilling and captivating episode. Now, there's actually a kind of a second part, because this is very similar to the Riot-Off episodes in Season 1, where you have an episode that sets up what's going to be needed, and Episode 2, or the next part, is going to be the one with the batch in it. This was a thrilling, captivating episode. We got political intrigue, we got return of some characters from the Clone Wars in Season 1, both Clone Wars and Season 1 of the Bad Batch, I should say. We got, of course, I think I mentioned the political intrigue, but all this is revolving around a conspiracy that certain Imperials are trying to cover up, and certain clones want exposed to the Senate. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy. So as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, this was a thrilling and captivating episode, filled with political intrigue and the return of some characters. And speaking of characters, let's actually discuss which characters were returning. So we got the return of Senator Chuchi. She's the senator from the I think it was at least one episode, maybe if not two, from the Clone Wars, where they go to the visit the moon Pantora. She actually appears later on too, where she works with Ahsoka to uncover a conspiracy. But this is a totally different conspiracy she's now working to uncover. But it's definitely, you can tell that they were writing her well, basically as a younger version of Senator Amidala. While I was preparing for this, I was like I kind of wish she had expressed a line or will maybe in the next episode about wishing Senator Amidala was their Padme, because it very much seems like she's in some ways fulfilling the same role that Padme did in many of the political episodes in the Clone Wars, but of course her own twist on it. Because let's be real, Padme I think was a much more seasoned politician, and you can tell Senator Chuchi she's not as confident in these scenarios that Padme would be. Padme would be taking control, where she would still probably put herself in some danger, but she would be taking control and dealing with it. You can tell Senator Chuchi she's doing well, but you can tell she's not as experienced in this kind of stuff as Padme would have been. Granted, Padme has had a lot more experience, but when we first saw Senator Chuchi all the way back in the Clone Wars, she was a young, inexperienced senator, so that makes sense. We're building upon her characterization. You can tell she's grown, matured, and become more experienced from when we first saw her, but we can tell she's still not to the level of experience of other senators and politicians we've seen in Star Wars, namely Senator Amidala, but also Senator Organa, who also makes an appearance, basically giving her some encouragement off the Senate floor. You can definitely tell he's being careful what he's saying because he doesn't want to reveal too much about what he's doing, but also wants her to continue pushing her what she's trying to do with helping the clones out. Because let's be real, everything she's focused on in this episode is helping the clones, dealing with the clones and not just throwing them away. Fortunately, that's probably what's going to end up happening knowing the Empire, but I have a feeling showing that the early seeds of rebellion are being planted in this episode. And of course, this episode is totally lacking of the Bad Batch and Inform. Even Crosshair doesn't appear as Admiral Rampart trying to push his bill that will allow for civilian conscription of citizens rather than clones. But essentially, what Senator Chuchi is working to uncover is what happened to Kamino. But that's only because she wanted to get the opinions of the clones of what they would like the bills to include to help them when they can no longer be troopers, no longer be soldiers. One clone, Flip, reveals this stuff to her. Unfortunately, he and his friend are killed by a clone sniper who's not Crosshair in two separate instances. And Senator Chuchi was nearly killed by that clone sniper first. Captain Rex didn't save her. And then they go to a lower level on Coruscant to interrogate this clone. It takes us a moment to figure out, is it a clone or is it not? But the scariest thing about this clone is he calls himself a true believer right before he kills himself. Yeah, that clone basically, not cyanide, it's something electric, but the same principle that you sometimes will see among true believers. And that's not the true thing, whether he's truly a true believer or his interpretership is still working, could go either way. Regardless, each of those are bad because that's going to show that the clones are truly divided. We always knew they were going to be somewhat divided, but because they are individuals, but this is really showing how they can be divided, that they are clones willing to kill other clones to stop the either advance the Empire. And take a note that Rex used his stun sight on his blaster to stop the clone sniper, but he probably did that mainly because he wanted to interrogate the clone. But also, if you connect that with the Bad Batch, although whenever they're facing clones, they're using those stun sightings as well. I think that's partially because they know that some of those clones are not doing this freely. They're basically forced to do it. And I think, but this is a clone who will basically be willing to kill clones. We've seen him already kill 2 of them. And it's implied that other clones have been killed for questioning the Empire as well. That actually makes me a little more nervous about Cody, but here's hope that he successfully deserted the Empire. But that was in a different episode, so who knows, maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. But I'm feeling the next episode, we'll see the Bad Batch, and they're going to help with all this, because remember, they also witnessed Rampart destroy Kamino. So they're probably not going to testify in front of the Senate, because that would really be bad for the Empire. And we know the Empire is not stopped. So I have a feeling we're going to get kind of a bittersweet ending, but happy in the short term. Survival. That's, I think, a lot of what we're going to be seeing in the Bad Batch. Kind of being set up with the previous episode Tribe. It's all about survival. If you can survive, you've won. That's why I think they're setting up for the next episode. But, man, the question is, basically, will the Senate actually find out about what happened to Kamino? I'm pretty sure Bail Organa will find out. There's no doubt about that. Well, there is some doubt, but I have a feeling he's going to be the one senator who does find out. But it does make me wonder, will the rest of the Senate find out about it? Or will somehow the Empire twist it to maybe claiming there was a clone rebellion or just a rebellion by the Camerons? Something to hide that the Empire is the one who destroyed Camino. But a few other things I would like to just take a note of in this episode. One, Masamida and Rampart both fully know what happened to Camino and both are fully intending to keep it from the Senate. And of course the Empire is all in on this as well. Duh. But also, where Rex and Senator Chuchi interrogate that clone is okay, from the Ahsoka episodes of the last season of the Clone Wars, those two, Rafa and I forget her sister's name. That's the garage they interrogate that clone in. But nice little connection right there. Just kind of showing how a nascent rebel cell forming up, if you will. But that's all I have for you for this episode. So stay tuned for the next episode, which is going to be coming up very shortly. Probably, well, depends on if you're watching it in the compilation or not. So that's all I have for this episode, Star Wars: The Bad Batch. As I said earlier, this was a thrilling and captivating episode full of political intrigue. Stay tuned for the next episode. But in the meantime, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below what did you think of this episode. I would love to hear from you. Now it's time to move on to discuss episode 8, Truth and Consequences. So this episode obviously is continuing the theming of the previous episode, political intrigue, and all that. It's another amazing, good episode. And just like with the Ryloff episode in season 1, it's an episode with the Bad Batch, and that's kind of spoilers, but that is important because it's the Bad Batch being confronted again with the reality of what's going on in the galaxy and being a call to action for them, especially one member of the Bad Batch, actually a couple of members of the Bad Batch, but especially one in particular. That I'm going to focus on in my full review. But this episode really was an amazing, spectacular episode, and kind of like I was feeling, it was not going to be great for the clones. The Empire, with the Emperor, was going to be one step ahead of them this entire time. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 8, Truth and Consequences. So this episode picks up exactly where the clone conspiracy leaves off. The Bad Batch are contacted by Rex, and they're tasked with retrieving the data that will prove that Admiral Rampart ordered the destruction of Camino. So the Bad Batch and Rex go sneak aboard Rampart's Star Destroyer, all that, have to fight some clones, and end up causing more damage to it. But that's a minor thing. Sure, they're fighting the Empire, really, and revealing the truth. But while all that's going on, Omega is getting a 101 on politics, because they make the wise decision. Actually, Omega is the one who makes the decision that she's not going to go do that. So she volunteers to come and Senator Chuchi. And part of it is to keep Senator Chuchi safe. But this is also probably the safest place for Omega, except for she's in the halls of the, the Senate, the Imperial Senate. And she literally is within like a meter, a yard basically, of Admiral Rampart at one point. And I'm like, does he recognize that she's a clone? Probably not. But she also gets to meet Bail Organa. And actually then the Center for Camino, who's now been disgraced. Basically sounds like the Empire used Senator Bonteri. No, that's a different character. The Senator from Camino used her as probably a scapegoat for some misappropriation of funds, which actually was Rampart who misappropriated. But all that's going on, and Bail Organa's house was the one who advised Senator Chuchi to talk with the former senator from Camino. And I suspect when the former senator from Camino entered Senator Chuchi's office and saw Omega, I suspect she suspected that Omega was a clone. That's the only person Omega reveals in the entire Senate that she's a clone, at least on screen. Probably is the only one. But that is kind of an interesting thing to know. I have a feeling that the Cameron Center suspected. I mean, what Cameron, who worked closely with the cloners, I mean, come on, there has to be a connection there. But like, they do successfully reveal the truth of what happened to Camino, but then the Emperor comes in and he twists it. Like basically, I'm a Rampart. He was in the wrong. He's gonna be punished accordingly. Guards arrest him. Literally. Actually, it was Masamida who ordered that, but and then the Emperor in his address basically says that And the fact that the clones so readily followed his orders, we can't trust, but not that we can't trust him, more like we can't rely solely on them anymore. And therefore, the bill that would allow for civilian conscription passes. Seriously, like the Emperor twists it. So kind of like I was suspecting, it was not going to be a happy ending, but I kind of like how, it shows the evil machinations of the Emperor. So in the final scene before the Bad Batch leave, they're talking about how they played right into the Empire's hand. The Emperor wanted them, in their estimation, to do this. Now, I suspect whether somebody revealing the truth or not, the Emperor was going to get his way no matter what. But he was able to use both of those scenarios and twist them to his own benefit. And then the most shocking reveal is that Echo is staying with Rex to fight the Empire and help the clones out. Which, this is a very sad thing for Omega, but also in some ways, it's important for her to learn that sometimes some things just need to have been. You just have to do them because it's the right thing to do. It's probably going to take her an episode to process this, but I see basically both points of view. Echo has been wanting to do more to fight the Empire, while Hunter has been wanting to keep them all safe, especially Omega, safe from the Empire. And in some ways, this is probably the best way of doing it. Echo and Fives doing probably the more dangerous work, rescuing clones, helping clones who are doubting the Empire and all that to escape. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch can be on the outside. The people they call when they need additional help. I have a feeling that's what's going to be, but it was a sad ending, and even if they didn't do that, it still was going to be a sad ending. But I do appreciate that it was a sad ending because, well, we need to know that the Empire is going to twist things to its own benefit. Like, let's just take in Star Wars Andor. Even if the Aldari heist didn't happen, the Empire is going to find some way to crack down on dissents and increase sentences, and so they can increase their prison labor. The Empire was going to find a way of doing that no matter what. The Empire just conveniently took the excuses, took an act of insurgency as an excuse. The point is, the Emperor is always going to find a way to twist those things to his benefit. He's a master planner. He orchestrated the entire Clone Wars, after all, which I'm glad that they did acknowledge in this episode. So it makes sense. He's a mastermind manipulator, so he's going to manipulate things to be his favor. Of course, eventually, as we know in the original trilogy, things are not. He's eventually not going to be able to manipulate everything, and that's going to cause his downfall. His overconfidence in his ability to manipulate. But right now, nobody is able to outwit his maneuvering. Bail Organa, you can tell, is doing his best, but even still, they can't. The Empire is just a master manipulator and has so much support. It's hard for those who want to fight the Empire to do so in the political theater. Hence why we do see a rebellion form, a rebellion that's going to take armed conflict to the Empire. And another thing to note is I do appreciate that Senator Tucci promises Omega that she'll continue to fight for the rights of the clones, because you can definitely tell Omega was saying that the clones didn't have any representation, and the closest was the Camerons, who only represented themselves. But that's probably where I want to really end this episode. It's kind of a lackluster ending on my part. It's kind of fitting for the sad and unfortunate ending of this episode that had to be that way because of its nature as a prequel. The Bad Batch couldn't succeed in stopping the creation of the Stormtroopers, but what they could do is succeed in helping solidify the early elements of rebellion against the Empire. But those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. So I have briefly talked about each episode for about 5 minutes, but what about what both of these episodes are saying as a whole? So I think I did kind of already address that subject, how these two episodes tell the story together. A little bit of my speculation at the end of my review section for the Clone Conspiracy, and then a little bit at the end of my review for Truth and Consequences. But what are these two episodes saying together, truly saying together as the sole focus of this section, if you will? What I think it's saying is, even if the emperor is going to twist things to his own benefit, you still should stand up and fight against it. That's, I think, what is both saying. The first episode was setup, but it was good setup. It was designed to show what the stakes are, and then truth and consequences, dealing with the truth, but also the consequences of the truth. So the Empire knows, especially now the Senate knows, and soon the wider galaxy will know what truly happened to Kamino. Now the only question is do people trust that what the stormtroopers are going to be a safe replacement of the clones, that they're not going to, do atrocities? They will. But like, does the galaxy trust it, or do they like recognize that the things are being twisted? We don't know that, but that's what it's setting up. So it does really nicely connect with what we've seen in Star Wars with the formation of the Rebel Alliance, and how you can tell people don't trust the Empire, so they rebel. Some people need more galvanization than others, but I guarantee you there's probably some rebel that we saw in one scene in the original trilogy that, if we get his story, it was this moment right here that galvanized him against the Empire, or her, or it, or they. We don't know. Could be a droid that's galvanized against the Empire. We just don't know. But that's the thing is, the truth has been revealed, but it's also been twisted. But the consequences of both the truth and the twisting now have to be dealt with. The emperor did get what he wanted, but he should realize, and he probably does, that there's going to be new members of the Imperial Senate who are going to maybe be a little more vocal and critical of the Empire now. There are going to be plans that maybe have an uptick in insurgency now. Those are consequences he's going to have to deal with, but of course he's going to twist those to get even more, because that's how evil dictators work. They twist things. They work to undermine the rule of law and the rule of democracy for their own gain. Those throw a lower subordinate under the bus if it means they can amass more power for themselves. That's the consequences of everything that's going on. But of course, the ultimate consequence of this is the Rebel Alliance itself that's going to be forming in, probably about 15 in galaxy years. It's going to come. The consequences of establishing an authoritarian, totalitarian empire will come to fruition. The consequences of that, the good and the bad. The good being, of course, the Rebel Alliance and movement against it that ends up destroying the empire, and thus later on the First Order. But that's a long time away. The consequences that are good for the galaxy are in the distant future. Where the Bad Batch sees that, I don't know, but it's an interesting thought. But I would love to hear all your thoughts on these two episodes in the comment section down below. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 9, The Crossing. So this episode deals with, well, the consequences of choosing consequences. Well, only one of the consequences. This won't be too much of a spoiler because it's dealing with the consequences of Echo leaving the Bad Batch. I won't tell you how they deal with them. I'm just going to tell you that they do deal with the consequences of that in this episode. Additionally, it's also a crossing. It's a journey for the characters, especially for two of the characters. Two of the main characters get significant character development for both of them. Obviously, I'm keeping which two characters a secret, but hey, that's only because I don't want to spoil it, because that will reveal a lot about how they're dealing with the consequences of the last episode. But I'm going to end my spoiler-free review there. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your general thoughts in the comment section down below. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 9, The Crossing. So if you haven't seen my spoiler-free review yet, it'll be linked up there in the cards. But in the meantime, let's just jump right on into and how this episode is dealing with the consequences of, well, choosing consequences, namely Echo leaving the Bad Batch. What the episode really shows is the Bad Batch as a whole is hit hard, they're adjusting to it, but the member who's hit the hardest is Omega, which makes sense. She's just a kid. She probably never really had a family on Kamino. Sure, she probably interacted with the occasional clone, and of course, Lama Su, I believe, or was it Lama Se? I get them mixed up. But she never really, I think, had a family on Kamino. Sure, it was her home as established in Truth and Consequences, but it wasn't her family. The Bad Batch is her family, so a member of the Bad Batch leaving it hurts her hard. Having Echo no longer be there is difficult for her. She's adjusting to it, but she's just a kid, so she doesn't fully understand why Echo made that choice. Why Echo, who might actually technically be younger than her, but is, because the clone aging is actually older than her, and is basically a grown adult, will make that choice to go fight the Empire. And probably she understands that. She probably does understand it intellectually, but not emotionally. But this is in contrast to Tech, who understands it perfectly, logically, and intellectually, but is lacking the emotions of it, and that comes into conflict with Omega, still dealing with the emotions of it, not being able to properly adjust to it because she's just a kid, and a member of her family is no longer there, and she misses him. But Tech, he keeps on saying the wrong thing because he's approaching it all rationally. He's not addressing his emotions. Though later in the episode, after they go through basically some rapids, they have a moment where they don't need to escape from a storm. They don't need to escape from a stampede. They don't need to escape from anything. They just gotta wait for Hunter and Rekka to meet up with them with their gear and all that. That they are actually able to have that conversation that they both need to have, where they more or less explain their perspective. Omega addresses her frustration that Tech does not to be not seen. No, that Tech is not showing any emotions. While Tech does admit that he still feels what's the word? He has those emotions, but he doesn't feel or process them the same as Omega, which is very good for Omega to hear. To know that Tech still has those emotions, he just doesn't address them in the same way that she does. Very much Tech is coded as autistic, different way of expressing emotions. You can definitely tell he's coded on the spectrum, has a high functioning but low social skills is probably a good way of looking at it. But highly analytical and all that. That's like where they placed him. But it does make sense. This is a character who doesn't process his emotions publicly. He addresses everything he's feeling from a logical perspective, probably because that's the best way for him to deal with him, especially as a soldier who has seen a lot. Sure, probably unlike Echo, he probably has. I don't think they've ever, except for Crossover, have never lost a member of the Bad Batch. So but Crossover is not dead. He's just not with the Bad Batch anymore. So he can process it in different ways. Same thing with Echo. But I have a feeling Echo, he lost and all his clone brothers he grew up with. All of Domino Squad is gone. Fives was the last one, and he was even there for that. He learned about it. So think of that. Echo would have been better able to relate to Omega because he's not there. It's much harder for her to probably find someone she can talk to. Though probably Hunter and Rekka would have done a better job than Tech. But the point of this episode was Omega and Tech having this conversation. Tech having that character development, coming to understand that he can't approach everything logically because not every member of the Bad Batch, has the same emotional processing as he does. That limited emotional processing. Those members of the Bad Batch who their emotions are much more forefront of their understanding. They're more willing to wear or show their emotions than Tech is, and he needed to learn that. And Omega was the one to teach him that, but Omega also needed to learn that sometimes things happen and you do have to adapt, but that doesn't mean you can't feel nothing. It's just, she needed to learn that some people process their emotions differently than her, which was a good overall character story. But this episode actually does end with a cliffhanger, because I didn't even address why they were on this planet to begin with. They were on this planet to mine a highly volatile mineral for Sid, and the Marauder gets stolen. So that's what sets off everything in the episode. Where they come to an abandoned spaceport, so they're at least able to contact Sid, but Sid is not that willing to, send some help from them. I feel like if one of them said, if you don't send somebody to rescue us, you ain't getting that mineral that you really wanted. I'm just saying, they could have said that, but that's not the point of the episode. The point is probably to show is that Sid may not be the most reliable ally for the Bad Batch. Because think of how, in the last episode in Truth and Consequences, as soon as Rex contacted them, they went there to help Rex. But Sid's not doing the same. She's not dropping everything she's doing to help them, while they did, in the last episode, drop everything to go help Rex. And that is also what Echo did at the end of the last episode to help Rex, to help, somebody who needed more immediate help in the batch. So it's kind of often together, and so I suspect at the end of the last episode, somebody's going to help them, whether it be Sid sending them someone to help them, or somebody doing it as their own accord, or just a helpful passerby. We don't know, but have a feeling that person is going to be more trustworthy, a better friend to the Bad Batch than Sid currently is. But that is where I'm going to end this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. What did you think of the crossing? I would love to hear from you. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 10, Retrieval. So, to begin with, this episode surprisingly reminded me of the prison arc of Star Wars Andor. Specifically, some of the same themes were explored. I don't want to reveal too much of it, so go watch the episode and you should see what I'm talking about. I would also like to mention that this episode showed why Gonki, so the Gonk droid the Bad Batch have, is important to them. I did not expect him to play a role at all in the story, but he does. Minute, but it is an interesting role that he got to play, and it was good that I think that I could, showing that all members of the Bad Batch are useful and are important. They all mean something to each other. So that's where I'm going to end my spoiler-free review. My full review will be coming out later today. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 10, Retrieval. So to get it out of the way, yeah, my predictions were pretty much wrong, except for the prediction that Sid was not going to be any help. I was right about that, but all my other predictions were wrong. And if you haven't done so already, check out my spoiler-free review of this episode if you would like to avoid spoilers, because spoilers are ahead. The Bad Batch rescue themselves. They are able to basically find the ship because Omega thought of, hey, we can track Gonki, and they found the ship because of that. And then of course also we learned that the ship was stolen by a young thief who's basically looking for a gang, for that better term, basically a person that's taking over a mine and is forcing everyone to work in it. In pretty rough conditions. We find out that he's holding all the food for himself and all the profits for himself, and is only giving the top owner their own meal, and everyone else has to share one bowl of soup. But the top owner gets a whole bowl of soup to himself, or whatever it grew. Probably is the best way of looking at it. But it's like, yeah. So he's in a situation where he has to steal to survive if he wants a chance to even be fed, which is kind of sad. But the Bad Batch uncover that, and so while also getting the ship back, they basically inspire the miners to revolt. It happens, but yeah. So essentially, we are getting a worker uprising in this episode of the Bad Batch, which is what reminded me of the prison arc of Andor, where the prisoners rose up against the occupiers. Granted, in this case, the miners are still going to be mining the mineral and all that, but they're going to be sharing the food and the profits all among themselves. So the miners have seized the means of production. Man, that sounds very leftist in my opinion. But again, why remind me of Star Wars Andor, which was probably the most leftist, explicitly leftist Star Wars show that we've gotten so far. And those same themes are present in this episode. Not to the same degree, but they are present, and I really do appreciate that. And also they draw a connection between Marcos, who's the guy who's basically controlling the mine before the Bad Batch gets involved. He's essentially doing the same thing as the Empire, creating competition between them so they don't revolt against him, or he's getting all the luxury to himself, gorging himself, all that. He's doing the same thing as the Empire, and that's something that Omega takes note of. And was it Tech or Hunter? I think it was Tech, basically. Well, there's a lot of people like Marcos and the Empire out there. There's also a lot of people like them who are in opposition, who will do stuff to fight the Empire. And I think this is getting them more willing to, rather than just play it safe, to actually maybe, hopefully, start fighting the Empire. Maybe we'll see that in the next episode. I don't know. But also I want to, because I had mentioned they were able to find the ship because they were able to track Gonki, so that's the Gonk droid. What it really shows is Gonki's important to them. No, not only are they, he's important to them not just because he's a power droid, but think about it, he's a defective power droid. He has no benefit really to keep around, but they do keep him around. He's important to them. So even though he is defective, he's still important to the Bad Batch. He's the reason why they even were able to find this ship to begin with and help the miners overthrow, the mine boss who was treating them terribly. It was because of Gonky. Like, who would have thought that simple Gonk droid, but then again, all hail the Gonk. But yeah, that's actually kind of neat too, because it's often a joke among the Star Wars fans about how Gonks are just amazing. They are. I mean, and this episode proves why Gonks are amazing. They're all important to the Bad Batch, therefore all Gonks are important. I think that works. Okay, yeah, that works. But that is where I'm going to end this review. I don't have too much more I would like to add, but I would want to say this. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comment section down below. Let's get the conversation going. Hey there, it's JohnBurry555 and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 11, Metamorphosis. So, this episode was, I think, the best way of describing it is a horror episode, especially the opening. I don't want to spoil too much, but that really does draw on horror themes, and those same themes and techniques and all that you see in horror films pop up from time to time in this episode. So it was actually, I would say, good that we got to get some genre changing. I honestly think Star Wars is the best when it does bring in other genres besides sci-fi and fantasy to inform its storytelling. Bring in horror or war films, all that. That's all good, helps really flesh out the universe. And I really do appreciate that this episode brought in horror elements to help tell its story. Now, to mention, this episode brought something back from the Clone Wars. But that's all I'm going to save in this spoiler-free review. Full review coming out later today. Hey there, it's JohnBurry555 and welcome to my full review of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 11, Metamorphosis. So as I said in my spoiler-free review, link down below, this episode was an episode that drew on horror themes to help tell its story. And I had also mentioned in my spoiler-free review how I enjoy it when Star Wars brings in genre elements from genres other than sci-fi and fantasy because it really helps flesh out the universe. So while I'm personally am not a big fan of horror films, I do appreciate how this episode brings those elements in to tell its story. And man, that opening sequence was straight up horror. Probably the closest I've previously in Star Wars, because I've never read, the Death Troopers book or some of the other more horror-y books. But man, the acclimated level of Star Wars Republic Commando, this brought me some reminders. And not just because a clone commando was being chased around in the opening sequence. And you know what? Speaking of clone commandos, that's the only Imperial soldiers we see at all in this episode. Just clone commandos. Which fits nicely, I think, for establishing why this episode, they are drawing on Holstins and what's really going on. Because it's delving into the secret projects of the Empire. Not the stormtroopers, no. It's all the really secret stuff that Palpatine, the Emperor, he doesn't want the wider galaxy to know, so he's only using the clone commandos to, do it. He's keeping it a secret. Which in a sense, when we first saw the Stormtroopers, then referred to as TK Troopers, it was clone commandos doing the training. Not regular clones, the commandos. And again, here's another project that the Empire is keeping secret from the galaxy. And who do we see as the soldiers enforcing it, keeping it secret? Clone commandos. I have a feeling there is something there. But you know what? That's all what the Empire is doing. Besides, trying to, convince Lama Say to help them with the project, which we figure out what it's later on, thanks to Omega. And speaking of, Crosshair again did not appear in this episode. He is overdue for an episode, but I think the setup might have been provided at the end of this episode, but I'll get to that later. So, the batch, when we first see them, they're contacting Sid. And they're mad at her for not helping them in any way. Not coming to rescue them herself. Not sending somebody to do it for her. They're mad at her. And basically, she what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, I think she picks up that they're mad, but she acts like it was nothing. Really, if they wanted to ally for a pirate, Hondo would have been a better choice. Especially because if you get on his good side, he likes you. Sid doesn't seem like you can really get on her good side, because it's always about what can she get out of it. Because, that's real. I'm just going to bring in Star Wars Rebels. Hondo, he helped liberate Lasar for Ezra for no other reason that he said he would do anything for that boat. Like, clearly shows that he's a pirate for heart of gold. That is not Sid. Sid is a pirate, is a smuggler, all that stuff, a scoundrel, but does not have that heart of gold. Will only do the right thing if there is something in it for her. But no, she does get the badge to go on another mission by saying, okay, I won't give you your standard rate of 30. I'll give her 50. But take 30 the bit you get though. She said, I'll give you 30 first. And then Texas, that's our standard rate. And they eventually, without saying a thing, pretty much get her to agree 50%. So they go, and guess what they find? They find that ship from the opening sequence of the episode. It's now crashed on the planet. And they knew they were going to come for a crash ship. But what they find on the ship is horrific. I mean, the whole seems all bound in here. So they do split up, and I'm like, oh great, because I saw the opening sequence. Like, Tech, do not go off by yourself. Thankfully, it's all right. He does restore power to the ship and all that. But it was kind of a bad thing. But they didn't know it at the time because, unbeknownst to them, there was something on board the ship, a monster that we saw all the way back in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I forget if it was season 1 or season 2. Let's see. I can actually check it because I have those 2 seasons. Yeah, that would have been season 2 with the Zilla Beast. So those are the only 2 seasons I actually have on disc. But that's neither here or there, as I struggle to put this back on the shelf. But yeah, the Zilla Beast makes an appearance, or more actually a clone of the Zilla Beast, but not quite. There's like something off about it. But they recognize, Omega recognizes the Cameron tech. So after the Zilla Beast escapes the ship, Hunter and Wrecker go aboard the ship to stop it, because they let it out and they did not want to hurt the town. And Tech and Omega go to retrieve what data they could. And because of Omega's knowledge of Cameron cloning tech, they were able to find that information they needed. And we do learn that Omega was vaguely aware of the Camerons doing some kind of cloning project, but that was being kept secret from her. I think what we found out what it was, but I really do appreciate how this episode is all connecting all the way back to those 2 episodes over the 3, all the way back in the Clone Wars. Well, anyhow, they eventually, figure out what's going on. Obviously, they figure out it's a Zilla Beast and all that. And they recognize it for what it was and all that. And of course, then the Empire comes. 3 Venters, gunships, like, they come in full force to retrieve the Zilla Beast. Not to kill it, to retrieve it, because they want it for whatever research purposes they are attempting to find out. And you know what? And like, they mean start attacking the Marauder, but then they also send troops to the village, and by the end of the episode, they have rounded up the entire village. So they want no witnesses. In fact, and actually, Scorch is the one who tells the Imperial scientists that we rounded up everyone, but one ship escaped, and the scientist tells Scorch to find out what that ship is. So something's going to come up to fruition. But what's weird is right after that, the scientist, the former Prime Minister of Camino, arrives on Mount Tantus, and, well, they get talking, and because the Imperial scientist wants to get Lamase's cooperation, so the Prime Minister tells him he needs to find a young clone girl. That's Omega. So the Empire is now once again probably going to be looking for Omega. And probably the only lead they have on it will be either the former senator for Camino. Hey, you gotta remember what happened in Truth and Consequences. There are the consequences they may have to deal with because of Omega revealing the fact that she was a clone to the senator. But there's also Crosshair. And I'm pretty sure it's known that the Bad Batch did pick Omega up. So, and they know Crosshair was once a member of the Bad Batch. So put 2 and 2 together. I think we could see Crosshair again soon once the Empire starts hunting them again. Especially because they also have the scans of his ship once again. So, yeah. But the Batch also make one very intelligent choice. The data that they got in the Zilla Beast, they do not send to Sid. They decide to send it to Rex and Echo, which I think was a very smart choice. And you can tell none of them like, should we send this to Sid? They like signed the agree to that, which I really do like. But yeah, this was definitely a very fascinating episode. And well, it's really it's ramping up the plot. It looks like that batch is once again on the Empire's radar, but specifically Omega because they need because the Imperial scientists because of what the former Prime Minister Camino said is they need Omega to somehow gain Lamasse's cooperation, and that I'm nervous about, but we just gotta wait and see. After all, Crosshair, they're probably going to wrap Crosshair into the hunt, but let's remember, he did not let the Empire know that the batch escaped the destruction of Camino, so there is something there. His loyalty to the Empire is not absolute. He still cares about his family, his brothers in the Bad Batch, so who knows how that's going to turn out. But I think I'm going to end my review there with that little bit of speculation. But I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comment section down below. Hey there, it's JohnBurry555 and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 12, The Outpost. So this was an excellent episode. It's going to be really hard to express my thoughts on the episode without spoiling it, but let's just say I finally got a correct prediction. Well, somewhat correct because I had made it very broad, but I still got it correct. So I'm just going to say it. We finally got another crossover episode, but I won't say too much, but definitely one aspect of this episode reminded me very much of the campaign, a story element from the campaign of Star Wars Battlefront 2. So that's a nice little connection, and we've also seen this previously in Season 1 of Star Wars The Bad Batch, this one element that shows something about a character. But I'm not going to get too much into it. And also, can I just say the Imperial Lieutenant in this episode, he's just the worst. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Hey there, it's JohnBurry555 and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 12, The Outpost. So as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, I finally got a prediction correct, though I do want to admit, I made my prediction very broad because I knew I was getting them wrong, so I thought, broad prediction, I'll have better luck with it. Turns out that was the way to go. But yeah, we got, finally, we got another crossover episode. This is really the second crossover episode, I think, this entire season. Which is quite shocking for, a member of the Bad Batch. Sure, he's not with the Bad Batch, but still. But yeah, so this was a crossover episode, and in fact, the predictions I made for Metamorphosis about Crosshair actually fits better with what happened in this episode. Because Crosshair, he basically was confronted with the reality of the Empire, finally. Truly confronted with the reality of how the Empire does not care for him or any of the other clones. He was truly confronted with that as a reality. Literally, when we first see him, his helmet is off in this episode. And that's very significant. More than once in Star Wars, whenever we've seen a character with a helmet off, who normally wears a helmet, and especially for a member of the bad guy faction, it normally means something. Star Wars Battlefront 2, the campaign, when Iden, Dell, and I forget the other, Hask, when they go to Iden's home world to retrieve that one whatever character, but when they leave their ship, Iden and Dell has their helmets off while Hask has his on. Which two characters betray the Empire later on in that mission? Iden and Dell, the two that were not wearing the helmet. Over and over again, we've seen characters, when they have their helmets off, normally indicate some kind of change going on with them, especially for characters associated with the bad guys. Think of, let's just go with, from Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the Siege of Mandalore arc, where Order 66 is the code. Rex has his helmet off, but he's shaking, he's trying to resist it. But the minute his helmet goes on, he's following the order, he's not resisting it anymore. Not until Ahsoka basically separates him and takes his helmet off and removes the chip. Once again, though, he's back in control. Oh, and we saw this in the Bad Batch too. Every time a character who's associated with the bad guys or around Order 66 has their helmet off, it's somehow relating to them resisting it or defecting from the Empire. We've seen this over and over again. Finn in The Force Awakens, his helmet gets smeared and then he takes that one moment to take his helmet off. For some we see his face, but it's also identifying him as being different from everyone around him, that he's, in a way, an individual, not a drone like the Empire of the First Order once. This is a common thing we see over and over again in Star Wars. Talked about this for like over a whole 2 minutes, so we gotta talk about the other aspects of the episode and what's going on. Well, basically, Crosshair and a few clones are sent by a young Imperial in Tenahu. Oh man, he's the worst. They're sent basically to help a outpost that's been getting raided. And we find out that outposts, those clones have been there for basically over, I think he said 36 cycles. Probably, let's just say a year. I don't know how long a cycle is, a month, I don't know. But he's been there a long time, and by the time Crosshair and the other, and basically the reinforcements get there, there's only the commander and 2 clones left. And those 2 clones don't, actually none of those 3 clones survive. The commander Mayday, he's the last one to survive. And he would have been left stranded in the tundra if Crosshair hadn't brought him back to the outpost. But an interesting thing to note, earlier in the episode, they were basically tracing the trail of the people who've been raiding the base, who've been, I still got some questions about them. Early rebels, perhaps? But, so, they come across one raider that Crosshair had shot, had apparently died of the cold exposure and loss of blood. And when Mayday wonders why they left him here, Crosshair responds, they did, dead weight not to carry. And basically that's sort of like, if Mayday had died, would Crosshair have brought him back? But the thing is, that's not what happens. Crosshair brings Mayday back. Sure, Mayday doesn't survive, but he brings Mayday back to the outpost rather than leaving him there. And the Imperials refuse to treat Mayday. And like, if a Mayday had run over right away, given Mayday some backup, maybe he might have survived, but he didn't. This is now definitely the second, if not the third, clone who defies the Empire that we've never seen again. We still don't know what has happened to Cody, that's still up in the air, but 2 clones the Empire just lets die when they question orders or outlive their purpose, as the Empire phrases it. Yeah. Oh, and that reminds me, so, as I mentioned, I also with Mayday and Crosshair, how Crosshair does. When he shot at that one raider, he has to take his helmet off. Again, reinforcing that he's starting to question orders, and he actually loses his helmet during all this. He loses his helmet. So when he's at base, he doesn't have his helmet. And at the end of the episode, or almost the end of the episode, where he shoots the Imperial Lieutenant dead. Then he collapses from exposure and his own injuries. But he does that, and he has his helmet nowhere nearby. This episode really shows that the Empire doesn't care about the clones, and the clones are truly questioning the Empire. But the ending scene has me nervous for Crosshair, really nervous. I think he's on Mount Tantus now. I think, remember that clone assassin from Truth and Consequences and the Clone Conspiracy? Yeah, I think the Empire is going to be experimenting on Crosshair and probably trying to turn him into one of those. That's just my suspicion. Though I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I do have my suspicion because, yeah, it's just weird. Like, they didn't arrest him. They did, but they didn't. They're like, yeah, I don't like what's going on there. So hopefully he comes out alright. The batch probably will rescue him because, everything's, I think, coming together. I think everything might be coming together. But another kind of interesting piece of the puzzle is, at the beginning of the episode, there were 3 clone officers that are being escorted right by an Imperial officer in an Imperial uniform, basically saying, they're complaining basically about they're being forcibly retired. But those are the lucky ones, probably. The clones who are retired and left on the streets are probably going to be the lucky ones. As we saw with the clone assassin a few episodes back, and then with whatever they're doing with Crosshair. I think the clones who are forcibly retired are the lucky ones, besides maybe the ones who don't have to deal with it at all and have died. I don't know. But yeah, forced retirement is probably the lucky clones. Yeah, which is kind of scary. But the Empire is just discarding clones, discarding the old. Because what the Outpost is guarding was new armor for the TK troopers, for the Stormtroopers. That's what they were guarding. The clones were not allowed to know where it was. But that's what they're guarding, that new armor that they could not use. They needed more equipment, but they were not allowed to have the stuff they were guarding. Isn't that just poetic? The Empire is disregarding the clones, tossing them aside for the new. and not even letting the clones have an inkling of the new, except for the few that they decide to experiment on. Just some thoughts there. But that's where I'm going to end this review. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comment section down below. Watching all this snow animation is making me really cold. I gotta put my coat on. Oh, cold. Ah, that's better. So yeah, so the snow animation this episode of The Bad Batch is so amazing. The Outpost has gone above and beyond for animating snow. I honestly can't think of any better snow scene in animation. Frozen sure had some pretty good animation for snow, but this is next level. Like, I legitimately felt like this was true snow. Not like kind of a slush, not like mud. Like, sometimes you get that where snow just doesn't act like real snow. Oh man, this looked like real snow. I felt cold watching it. It was so amazingly good. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 13, Pabu. So this was an amazing episode. It was a really good, slowed-down type of episode, but still had some action. But how do I talk about the episode without revealing any plot details? Well, how about we do it by addressing my predictions and how I got them wrong. Pabu's not a person, it's a place. The threat is not the Empire, it's nature. That's, I think, all I'm going to say, but this was a very good episode for The Bad Batch. It got them a chance to truly reflect, consider other options for hiding from the Empire, from cutting contact with Sid. It got them to truly consider some additional options that they hadn't really considered before. But I'm going to leave you guys with that. My full video will be coming out later today. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my full review of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 13, Pabu. So, to begin with, let's just address how, in my predictions, I was wrong that Pabu would be a person. Instead, it was a place, and I was also wrong that somehow a threat from the Empire showed up, rather it was a threat from nature. But, as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, that was a good thing. It was good. It gave the Batch a time to truly reflect on, hiding from the Empire and cutting contact with Sid, and potentially another way of doing it. And this episode saw the return of Fee Genoa, I think is how you say her last name, but it doesn't really matter. We got her character returning, and way back in the episode, not The Crossing, the episode of The Crossing, I forget the exact episode's title, but I had predicted that maybe Fee would save her and she would be a more reliable ally to the Bad Batch than Sid. Well, it turns out I made that prediction a bit too soon because it's coming to fruition in this episode, because Fee's the one who directs the Bad Batch to a settlement known as Pabu. I'm not sure the name of the planet, it's just called it Pabu as well. But the small island is an upper and lower Pabu. It's basically presented as a tropical paradise. Of course, here's me during this entire episode thinking, what's going to happen? Something's going to happen to destroy this little piece of paradise. Ends up not being the Empire like I was expecting, but it does end up being nature. But I'm getting kind of ahead of myself there. But might as well just get ahead of myself and talk about what's everything going on in the episode. So the episode opens, because we need to talk about the recap and what sets us all up, is the Batch is helping Fee with a negotiation for some kind of artifact. And then it's a worthless piece of artifact, but it's not, because it's culturally significant. In some ways, this provides some nice context on, well, how something like us Westerners may dismiss as insignificant because it's not Western, it's not American or whatever. And you can get that in the other way. There's probably some Japanese people who see a piece of American art and they're like, that's nothing. Chinese, Russians, Kenyans, Nigerians, doesn't matter. No matter where you're from, there's always this, some chicken from another culture that you dismiss as worthless. But that means something to the people who made it, or from the culture of the people who made it. It means something to them. It's a reminder of home. And as it turns out, a lot of the artifacts that Fee is liberating, the term she uses, she's bringing to Pabu, and it basically goes into a museum that sounds like every citizen, every resident of Pabu can visit. And because most of the residents there are refugees, they're escaping the Empire or something, probably some from the Clone Wars too, but just a place where refugees have come to find a home. So this central place, like the center of the town is literally, granted it's on a hill, but still the center of this town at the top of the hill is basically a museum housing all these artifacts, these cultural artifacts that most people regard as insignificant, but mean something to these people because it could be all that's left of their culture, all that reminds them of the home. Like, it means something to them. It's culturally important. Maybe not monetarily important, but it's culturally important. But Fee brings a batch there, and she confirmed that she's never told Sid about this place. So that's also showing that that Fee is gonna be a better ally, a better friend, a friend of the Bad Batch than Sid, who, she's a good ally, but don't get on her bad side. And the Bats kind of have got on the bad side. But cutting contact for, they're literally just cutting contact cold turkey. So hoping she thinks they're dead. Like, I mean, but so, and one important thing that Fee brings up is that Omega needs children her own age, to have a life other than being on the run, and that's it was shortly after saying that in the message from Sid, basically threatening the Bad Batch, that Fee gives them the coordinates to Pabu, and they go there, and of course they meet the mayor's daughter, all that, and Fee, sorry, Omega and the mayor's daughter, whose name I forget, they click, I mean, there's one moment where Hunter says that he hadn't seen Omega laugh like that in a long time, like, and you can definitely tell Hunter's thinking like, this may not be a good place to stay safe. Still kind of like, they need to realize they're going to need to fight the Empire at some point. It's going to happen, but he's seeing that this is a place where Omega can grow up. Can just be a kid. Doesn't have to always be looking over the shoulder, worry about if the Empire's after them or somebody else. Some place to be safe, and a place to even help out. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the lower Pabu is destroyed by basically a tsunami. There's some tremors and the water, the tide recedes, comes back, and it's destroyed. And Hunter and Tech mainly, I wonder why. I think Tech is finally picking up on the fact that Fee is flirting with him. I think he's finally picking up on that fact. So they both like, yeah, we can stay a little bit to help you guys rebuild. And probably both of them were thinking more so, maybe more than just stay to help rebuild, potentially, good place to set it down. But also, here's me in the back of my head. Looks like a new status quo is being set up. A good status quo for the Bad Batch. So that means it's going to get destroyed. I'm afraid of that, but at the same time, it's like, one of the questions that Hunter asked the mayor was, what if the Empire shows up? And, of course, the mayor's response was, we're a small, insignificant island with no resources, and we're quite resilient. So not saying like, oh, they would never bother us, but why would they bother us? But if they did, we're resilient. And then we saw that resilience with them, dealing with that tsunami, that wave, helping the entire town evacuate. While only property was damaged, all the residents were evacuated to Upper Pabu, where they would be safe from the wave. And like, that's showing community. And it really shows that this is a good community, but also means that when the Empire does come, because they probably will, because the Batch is there now, it's not going to be as good for them. But at the same time, the Batch is there, so if the Empire came, the Batch will probably help defend the town, which, is something to consider too. I mean, that's one way of helping the Empire, by helping protect the people who have fled the Empire. I'm just saying. But going back with Omega and the mayor's daughter, after dinner they go out boating basically, because hey, it's a nice peaceful area, and also Hunter sees that Omega's interested and lets her do it. And then, but because they're out there when the water recedes for the wave, but Hunter rescues them using their ship, and it's basically a happy ending, something that we have not truly seen for the Bad Batch. Of course, as I mentioned, inside and out, the status quo has been changed. It's been changed for the better, but that also means in the next episode too, it's going to get shaken again. Because why would you set up such a good status quo if you're not going to rip it out? It's going to be heartbreaking. I'm predicting it already. But that's probably what they're going to do to really show how bad the Empire is. Not only do they because in the last 2 episodes ago with the Zero Beast, a village minding their own business was all arrested because they witnessed the Zero Beast. So this episode, now, we see another village, peaceful living, has no reason for the Empire to bother them. But if the Empire comes, they're going to just come and take over. It's just going to be what happens. But I have a feeling, that could also help motivate the batch to fight the Empire. See all these different possibilities? But the heart of this episode, the truly most important part of this episode, in my opinion, is this. The batch, especially Hunter, are realizing that we can't always be on the run. We need a sense of community, especially for Omega. She's a child still. She needs to grow up, be around kids her age. Like, they're all realizing that. And also showing that they can be more than just soldiers or mercenaries for hire. Like, you can definitely tell. Fee has been flirting with Tech, which by the way, Record picks up on. That Tech Record just picks up on and kind of makes light of it with Tech, which that might be an actual clue Tech in. But you can definitely tell in this episode, Tech is, I think, finally realizing that Fee is flirting with him, and you can definitely tell he does enjoy her company. But does he really understand what's going on yet? I don't know, but I do kind of want somebody, probably Omega, to actually have a conversation with Tech about it to help him process his feelings. Because remember, back in the crossing, Tech and Omega had that moment where Tech admitted to Omega that he still has feelings, just doesn't process them the same as her. So that means she's the one we've seen on screen, at least, that has had the most conversations with Tech about his different understanding of emotions and all that. So that was set up, meaning if Tech needs to talk to somebody about it, or someone brings it to his attention, like truly bringing it to his attention, not a playful manner, it would be Omega, because of what was set up a couple episodes ago. But I think I'm going to end that there. I've talked about the episode, I've talked about what this episode could be setting up, and probably the tragedy that will be coming because of all the good that was set up in this episode, because I have a feeling they're just going to rip the out from under us. But you know what? It was a good episode. That's the important part. This was a good episode. A very important episode. An episode basically that gave the batch a time to reset their mental health batteries. Got a moment to relax, but also got to help others again and truly help others and see the results of their help. Because the last time they truly tried to help somebody who was, not actively fighting the Empire, well, it was because they accidentally caused it, and it was not successful because the Empire came in. The Little Beast episode. But this is the first episode where they've just helped a community and felt welcomed by that community at the same time. It was perfect. Oh, and you know what also was just a good another moment of the episode? There was a moment where Riker actually said that for the first time in his life, he's full. And Tech goes, let me make a note of the date and time so we can commemorate this moment. Like, just shows how they are brothers. They are a family. That moment, that's just such sibling energy there. But I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. Also, let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of this episode? Let's get a discussion going, and I would love to hear from you. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 14, Tipping Point. So like I was thinking, this was going to be a tipping point, a turning point in the story. Everything's coming together. I won't reveal too much, but this is the first time since Season 1 where we have seen every single member of the Bad Batch. That's all I'm going to say on that, because there's a lot more to it, and if I revealed any more, that would spoil it, but everything's coming together. We are getting towards the climax of the story, the end of the story. It is all coming together, and I have a feeling it's going to be very exciting with whoever comes down. But that's all I have for my spoiler-free review. Full review coming out later today. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full review of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 14, Tipping Point. So like I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, this episode is a turning point. It's a tipping point. Everything is coming together. We are getting towards the climax of the show, the ending. We're getting closer. All those pieces are coming together. And as I mentioned, this is the first episode since Season 1 where every single member of the Bad Batch appeared. That's right, we got Crosshair, we got Echo, we got Hunter, Tech, Omega, Reco. We have all of them. We even got Hauser back, all the way from the write-off episode in Season 1. He even makes an appearance in this episode. Gregor, too. It's all coming together. Wherever it's going to be. Basically, I'm predicting Clone Rebellion. That's my thinking. But what it is going on is, well, we don't know quite yet, but we know Dr. Hemlock, he's doing something with clones. Basically, he's having the Empire send him clone dissidents, and he's doing something for them, but he's treating, I think, Crosshair slightly different, because he wants to use Crosshair to get to the Bad Batch, to get Omega, to get Lama Say's, or is it Lama Su? I get those two Kimons mixed up, but get her cooperation. So we know that. And Crosshair is not helping him. In fact, what he did is he escaped. So he summoned the doctor's assistant too. Some people think he's a clone. I'm not so sure. But who knows how that could be. But anyhow, he escapes and he sends a message to the Bad Batch, plan, I think it was 89, on basically warning the Batch that people are after them. Now, the Batch is now questioning, is that a trap or not, because they think back to last time. But the fact that also that he's on the record of getting sent to this facility where Hauser and the two remaining of his the two remaining of his men that basically, like during that Ralph episode, so did not want to follow the orders. Only 3 of them total survived. Yikes! And it was in a prison, and not even the one where they're being probably experimented on. But anyhow, Tech found Crosshair's number on that list, so he was able to. So he went and checked the Batch's old communication frequencies, and that's how he found Crosshair's warning to them. But that is interesting. And the question is Dr. Hemlock aware that Crosshair sent that message? I think there's a good chance, not revealed, but there's a good chance because, let him do that. Might help catch the Bad Batch, playing multiple angles to get what he wants. It's very possible, but everything's coming together. Though I am getting a little nervous for Senator Chuchi. She reappears and you can tell she's helping the clones with their mission. So in other words, the native rebel cell is being formed, but who knows? We never see her in Rogue One or other episodes or other instances of later rebellion, so I'm nervous. But then again, the senator from Terrace we saw in the episode of the Bad Batch of the Clone Conspiracy, so it's always possible. But yeah, everything's come together. I think everything's come together for a clone rebellion to truly explain why there's so few clones with the Empire by the time of Rebels. Well, granted, a lot of them would be too old, but still, showing why so many clones are not in service of the Empire. And it also shows that I think the clones truly did, despite their situation, believe in democracy, in the Republic, and that's kind of interesting too. But yeah, it's very interesting. I'm really liking how they're taking it. I think this could create some very emotionally compelling story, but it's going to be, I think, a tragic ending once we get to the climax. But we gotta wait and see. That's the nature of a prequel, so we know that all these characters we don't see again, but that's maybe because they're in hiding. I don't know, but there's a lot coming together, and I think it's going to be exciting, but also tragic as well. But those are just my thoughts on this episode and everything to come. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But there's one other thing I would like to mention, that prison that Hauser and his fellow clones were being held on. That planet, if Balmora? No, that's from Willow. But the name was a planet, I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the name was a planet from Star Wars The Old Republic, the MMO game, which I thought was a neat little reference there, if you will. But yeah, that's all I have to say, so I hope you enjoyed it. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review for Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 15, The Summit. So just to begin with, this is a part 1 in effect. It's the first part of the 2-episode season finale for Season 2, and I gotta say, it was climactic. It was everything you would hope in a part 1. Setting up the stakes, had some good intrigue, some good twists, which I'll get into in my full review. And it ends in such a way that leaves you wanting to watch the next episode, which I haven't seen at the recording, but I'm going to be recording in just watching in just 1 second, then recording it in more like 30 minutes. But you know what I mean. It was a great beginning to the season finale, so let's just see where it takes us from here. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 16, Plan 99. Which is the final episode of Season 2, the season finale. And you know what? I'm not going to say anything else about this episode. Watch it and then watch my full review, because if I say anything about this episode, I will spoil it. I'm not taking that chance at all, because too much happens, and I just don't want to spoil any part of this episode for you. So go watch the episode if you haven't done so already, and then go check out my full review, because yeah, these spoilers, yeah, there's no way of talking around them and hiding them. I just have to speak them out right in. Yeah, this video won't cut it, so go check out my full review later today. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my full and combined review for the last 2 episodes of Star Wars: The Bad Batch Season 2. So this is the season finale of Season 2. We have episode 15, The Summit, and episode 16, Plan 99. So I'll be dividing this review into 2 sections. In fact, I'll be just taken from my individual episode reviews, but with some added context and a more encompassing conclusion at the end. But kind of the introduction I want to kind of convey to you is that the summit was action, Plan 99 was tragedy. That's probably a good way of looking at it. But let us jump right on into it. This is my review of the summit. So like I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, this is the first part of the 2-episode season finale that's premiering today, so check if you haven't watched it out. But as of the recording of this segment of my 2-part review, is that it was an exciting episode. It set up everything very well. There was some intriguing twists and turns, and it ended with a nice cliffhanger. So basically what's going on is that the Batch decide that they're going to somehow save Crosshair and the other clones there. Makes sense. And they realize that Dr. Hemlock, through some intelligence, that he's going to meet with Tarkin at the summit of Tarkin's compound on Iriadu. So I think this might be the first appearance of Iriadu on screen in canon. So I was wrong about which summit they were going to be summiting and all that. But you know what? I was still somewhat right that Dr. Hemlock would be meeting Tarkin. Though that was not the only person he was meeting. Krennic, Project Stardust made an appearance. So yeah, that's kind of neat. Very started for Stardust, just Project Stardust, but Krennic appeared. But that's kind of getting sidetracked from the episode itself. So they infiltrate Tarkin's compound to plant a tracking beacon on Hemlock's ship so they can track him back to his base, which we know as Mount Tantus, but they do not know that yet. And so it's going well for them. Then they notice some of the security cameras are off. Yeah, they're going to investigate, and guess who they run into? Saw Gerrera. And that's on the entire Sonan's plan, because Saw's plan is to destroy the base and kill Tarkin, Hemlock, and all the other Imperial officials there. Because that probably would have stopped Project Stardust sooner, but how was he supposed to know that? But like, their missions are in direct contrast. Saw just wants to hurt the Empire, lash out against it, hurt it, and cause them pain, and that's all he wants to do. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch is like, hey, we're gathering intelligence that could help your cause, help you destroy the Empire in the future. But Saw Gerrera is so short-sighted, he just wants to hurt the Empire in the here and now. In a way, he doesn't have the patience to wait to hurt the Empire. And I think that's a very good contrast and helps explain a little bit more why later in the timeline, why Saw Gerrera is so estranged from the rest of the Rebel Alliance. He does what he wants to hurt the Empire, and he's now working in concert with the other Rebel cells most of the time. So it creates friction against them. They maybe even, their missions may, in this case, are directly opposed to each other. I do kind of like that nice little subtle hint. I also really appreciate during Hemlock's meeting with Tarkin and some other Imperial officials that they are aware that there are senators like Senator Chuchi who are fighting for the clones, and they are also aware that they still got to play a little bit by the Senate's rules, because the Emperor hasn't submitted firm control yet. What is Project Stardust's intending goal? To allow the Emperor and the Empire to implement firm control of the galaxy without the need of the Senate. I really do like how all that is weaving together. But of course, things don't go to plan because they end up getting a firefight, so both of their missions are compromised. So neither of them complete their mission. So at least Saw gets to destroy parts of the base. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch, yeah, that doesn't happen. At first I thought Saw was going to take Hemlock's shuttle with a tracking beacon on it, but no, it gets destroyed when he destroys the base. which is kind of unfortunate that the Bad Batch didn't accomplish their mission. But I have a feeling next episode with Plan 99, that will somehow allow them to accomplish this mission. But we just got to wait and see on that, because I need to go and watch it. But before I do that, there's just one other little thing I would like to make note of. That the TK troopers, the stormtroopers that escorted Hemlock to Tarkin's meeting room, and that came into the meeting room when the compromise of the base was discovered, are all wearing red markings, like the Coruscant shock troopers back in the Clone Wars. And also there was, I think, Imperial shock troopers might have been the official designation that we saw in Battlefront 1, that's the first Battlefront game. And there was a few other things like that I would mention, but kind of interesting to note. There's no Death Troopers yet, so they're using specially marked Stormtroopers, I guess. Now that we got the summit discussed, let's move on into my review of Plan 99. So if you haven't seen my spoiler-free review, don't bother checking out. I literally tell you there to go watch the episode, then come to this video, because I could not talk about this episode without revealing spoilers, because just too much happened. Tragedy. That's the one word to summarize. This is a tragic end. But it also does mean that there's probably going to be a season 3. Thankfully. I was actually convinced that we might get only a 2-episode series. But looks like we're going to be getting a season 3, because if Star Wars and Lucasfilm do not complete the storyline, they're going to anger a lot of people. So where to begin? Well, Plan 99, well, remember what happened to 99 in the ARC Trooper arc of Star Wars The Clone Wars at the very end where he sacrificed himself? Yeah, that's Plan 99. Tech institutes Plan 99 in order to save the rest of the Bad Batch. They go back to Old Man Town City because they need AZ3 to give them medical attention. Finally, they've got him, and they finally got him with them. Though Sith betrays them to the Empire. But you can also tell that she's not happy about it, which is not something I expected. But she's looking out for her own self-interest, which is what that gangster all the way a couple episodes back had to predict. And seeing that episode, that was one of the first episodes really showing us getting a lot of Tech character development. We saw a bunch of character development for Tech throughout this season. And so when Plan 99 did it, it was perfectly building up, come on. But at the same time, do I trust Dr. Hemlock's claim that Tech perished and he only was able to save his glasses? Honestly, I'm not so sure. It's probably true. I think for the emotional story beating, it should be true, but there's no guarantee. But yeah, so Omega, of course, does get captured right after Hunter and Wrecker are captured by Dr. Hemlock. But because of Echo, at least Hunter and Wrecker are freed, but they have no idea where Omega is. But we know Omega has been taken to Mount Tennis so that way Dr. Hemlock could get Lama Say's cooperation. And yeah, and crossers are being experimented on. And we figure out that one Imperial technician, whatever, Emery, yeah, she's a clone. She confirms it, if she's telling the truth. But it wouldn't surprise me at all. We were all getting that impression at first to begin with. So now we know of another female clone trooper. So that means we know 3 female clones. We got Omega, who, well, we don't know too much about Omega, but we assume biological female. No, that's her genetic modification, for lack of a better description. Or just different genes activated. We don't know anything about Emery, but we do know in the book Brotherhood, and I think also Queen's Shadow. I think I haven't read that one, any of those books yet, but we know a transgender clone named Sister. So we don't know where Emery falls on that from biological to transgender. We do not know. But I'm getting the impression, because there's more focus on the genetics going on, that she's probably more like Omega. But I could be wrong, but is she even telling the truth? That's another thing we got to wonder. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and that's probably what's going to be explored in Season 3, hopefully, when we get it. But lots of interesting stuff, and of course, Crosshair's there. And Crosshair, I think, is being experimented on, but for what purposes, we don't know yet. But also, at the same time, now that Omega's there, maybe Emery may start questioning Dr. Hemlock. I don't know, because remember, Crosshair didn't only stun her when he made his warning to the Bad Batch. I don't know, but there's just so much happened in this episode, and it ended on a bummer note, pretty much. The only positive is AZ is now with the rest of the Bad Batch. Well, not rest, but is not with Sid anymore. That's like the only positive thing I can think about that happened at the end of this episode. So yeah, well, at least it's something positive. But this also does mean it elevates the stakes for season 3 that much, which is no good storytelling to elevate the stakes. Especially when these are emotional. Sure, we care about what Hemlock is doing to the clones and how that's going to help the Empire, but the real thing that's elevating the stakes in this episode is Omega's capture. And the claim revealed by Emily that she's also a clone. Sure, that's neat and all, but that's not part of the emotional stakes of the emotional storytelling. It's just another intriguing part to the plot. But really, the stakes were elevated in this episode with Omega's capture. Well, first Record and then Hunter's capture, but truly, the stakes at the end of the episode is emotional all around Omega's capture. Is she going to be safe? Will the Bad Batch successfully rescue her? Will she, Crosso, and maybe even Emily and the other clones will somehow rescue themselves? We don't know. But the stakes are all emotional. It's not Death Star, it's not Starkiller Base, which at times definitely can work in certain scenarios, especially in the way they were presented as the all-encompassing threat of an evil empire. But here, for a personal story about characters, you need a personal stake. You need an emotional stake. And that is what this episode provides. So now that that's all done, we've reviewed both episodes, where do I want to end this? I think it's going to end this way. Subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, because when Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 3 comes out, I'm definitely going to be talking about it because I want to know what happens. This episode is really, while the Summit had action and some tragedy, Plan 99 was totally different. Like, we got to see Omega's point of view for Out Loud. Like, I didn't even expect that. Like, I forgot to even talk about it in my individual section, so I'm tacking it here at my conclusion. Which, by the way, I just love it when we do that. We saw that with Agent Callus and through Imperial Eyes a little bit as well. But it really helped set the tone and the stakes of this episode even more with that one scene. They did such a good job with that. But at the same time, this episode was one tragedy after the other. Like I said earlier, the only good thing was AZ being reunited with the Bad Batch. That's the only good thing that happened in this episode. Well, plus the mystery of Emily. Is she really a clone? Or is she lying? Is she telling the truth? That's another thing too as well. But you never know. But yeah. So subscribe to my channel, ring that bell, because I will be talking about Season 3 when it comes out. So I gotta be honest with you. This is not how I expected Season 2 of The Bad Batch to end. I was kind of expecting it to be the last season, so I was kind of expecting it to end on a tragic, not necessarily tragic, but on a bittersweet but still content note. Like, the idea is like, it's not a great ending, it's not a happy ending for all, but it's not a terrible, tragic ending like we actually got. I actually recently saw on Reddit a series that Tech survived because he would have had a parachute because he would solve all possibilities. Like, okay, I'll say this. If Tech survived, that better be how he survived. But it's not in Tech's character to, prepare for him falling, but none of the other Bad Batch. He would have given them all parachutes. Plus, we've never actually seen parachutes in Star Wars, but that's neither here or there. But what I'm saying is, I like the theory, but it ain't happening because of Tech's character. So, does that mean I don't like the theory? No, I do, because it's a good, solid theory, and it would be fitting in with Tech's character, except for the fact that he didn't do it because he wouldn't have just protected himself with a parachute. Plus, they probably even have parachutes in Star Wars, apparently, because everyone has jetpacks. So why didn't he have a jetpack? Why didn't the clones have all jetpacks? That would have been so smart, especially the Bad Batch. But, no. I mean, you have to maintain a jetpack so somehow Mandalorians can, but they're Mandalorians, not Jedi. Oh, the clones, not Mandalorians or Jedi. That's what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, so like, while I did like that theory and it does offer a good way of explaining a Tech survival, it's not something I see as a possibility, because then the other characters would have had a parachute as well. Maybe they would have done that instead of trying to restart the cable train. I'm just saying. But that's just a minor thing in here, though. We're all going through the stages of grief, denial, or anger, compromise, these series on how Tech can survive, that's in the bargaining phase. But I think I'm pretty sure I already mentioned it, but I'll just mention it again. If Tech survived, while I would love it, and I don't fully trust Hemlock's claim that all he could find was Tech's glasses, I will say this. I think Tech's survival would ruin his sacrifice in his character development. While that may sound cold, I think it's the truth. His sacrifice meant something. His sacrifice was Plan 99. Clone, no, 99 the clone. Right, it's named after him. I know I said that. And I think Tech, all the character development we got for Tech is showing why he made this choice. He's logical, so of course he sees this as the best option to save his family. He may not, and he announced Omega in an early episode. He sees things much more analytically, but he still has feelings. He just processes them differently. And so that does mean that in that situation, he's processing his emotions, and maybe he's aware that the rest of the Bad Batch will be devastated by his loss, but he also knows that the only way for them to survive is if he basically executed Plan 99. So what did he do? He said that he was going to do Plan 99 and sacrifice himself so they could live. He made the logical choice. In Star Trek, Spock would say, most logical. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Yes, I'm bringing Star Trek here because I think it is important. It's a good way of looking at it. Tech, in many ways, thinks like a Vulcan. And just like Tech, many people saw Spock as also being neurodivergent. And there's a theory that he's neurodivergent for a human, but also neurodivergent for a Vulcan. But that's Star Trek, not Star Wars. But I did want to bring that in just to kind of show how, in some ways, Tech's form of neurodivergency does make him think very much like a Vulcan from Star Trek, and therefore he does have emotions, but he just processes them and understands them very differently, and does not allow them to dictate his decision making, thus allowing him to make the choice to sacrifice himself. But also, he's making that choice because he knows for the batch to survive, he has to sacrifice himself, and because he knows that intellectually, but he also knows that emotionally, he wouldn't live for himself if the batch died trying to save him. He probably also knows that, and he maybe knows that grief is not something he could deal with, or something he wants to subject any other surviving members of the Bad Batch to. Like, let's say Rekko sacrifices himself to save Tech. I don't think Tech wants that to happen. Does that make sense? I think Tech rather sacrifice himself to save his brothers, his family. And that, I think, is the important thing of Tech's sacrifice, and why I think Tech surviving would ruin it. Now, that was a lot about that one little topic, but this season was great, and I have to say, despite the tragic and bummer ending, I mean, it really is tragic, it was a good ending because it shows the batch probably at the darkest, at the lowest they're going to be in the story. Though, who knows, things can get lower. This is known as the Dark Times, especially in Star Wars Legends. So the Dark Times, Age of the Empire, it does make sense that things weren't going to be rosy, but we were hoping for at least, if not rosy, at least, bearable. It doesn't look like we're going to get that, but who knows at the end of Season 3. It could be very much these two seasons showing kind of a similar arc structure. Season 1 ended not too dissimilarly from how The Force Awakens or New Hope ended. Things are relatively good for the heroes. Not perfect, the enemy is still there, but the most pressing threat has been dealt with. Then Season 2 comes in, and, well, the Empire, the First Order strike back, and things are not that great. So Last Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, yeah, things are not great for our heroes. But that doesn't mean the next episode things are going to come out better, or next season. So I think there's a good chance that we could be following a 3-arc structure. So hopefully that will be the case. So that's where I think I'm going to end this review. I do hope you enjoyed it. I do hope you enjoyed this journey, going through all of Season 2 and everything we've done to discuss it, and everything we have done to explore the concepts, the themes, and the events of the episodes in the season as a whole. Very much, I think this is showing a lot what's going on with the Empire of the Clones, but also the tragedy of it, the tragedy on a family level. Because looks like in Andor, we're exploring some of those similar themes with the Empire, but later in the timeline, after the Empire has cemented its power. Well, here in the Bad Batch, we're exploring the Empire's rise and how in the rise, they are stepping on people, destroying families. Conversely, Andor showed us the Empire already had its power, but continue to step on people and oppress people to maintain power. That's the difference. This is the Empire gaining power and cementing power, not keeping power. But that is where I'm going to end this review today. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, upvote, and share. Also, in the comment section down below, feel free to let me know your thoughts on Season 2 of Andor. Let's keep this discussion going, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot I missed and a lot more we can talk about. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you, always.